testify for that, fill out cards, and note which hearing you're here to testify for on those cards. That hearing will hopefully be able to wrap up its session for today. We won't close the hearings, but and then we'll move into Task 5 Mixed-Use Zones Projects work session at 8 p.m. So with that, are there any items of interest? Go ahead.
On the way over here, I did a little ground truthing on the 2035 Central City Plan by swimming in some of Portland's great swimming holes on the Willamette, and I can say that on the Holman Dock, there's almost as many people there right now as there are in the room right now, basking in the sun. So thank you guys for coming out here on a lovely day. And look forward to this next week going on a little tour of natural areas with Mike and Bob, and maybe other people can go too if they want.
Great. Chris?
So tomorrow, City Council is going to take up the Portland Action Plan for the Powell Division Transit Corridor project. And my colleagues will remember that many months ago we made a recommendation on that. So I'm apparently the officer with a hole in his calendar, so I will be appearing at City Council to convey our recommendation, which is essentially that, you know, good plan, wish it had more affordable housing, and make sure you fund it all.
Thank you for finding time to do that, Chris. Much appreciated. Mike?
Yeah, Eli had a great piece on the infill project in the Tribune today, so people who are interested in that should check it out. It was really well done.
Any other items? With that, Joe?
No additional items.
Fabulous. Okay, consent agenda. So this is consideration of the minutes from June 28th and July 12th. Do I have a motion?
I move the consent agenda.
Move to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so we'll now begin our Task 5 Miscellaneous Zoning Code Amendments hearing. Thanks, John. So if you're here to testify on the miscellaneous zoning code amendments, there's testimony cards in the back of the room. Please fill one out. Please state that it's for the miscellaneous zoning code amendments hearing, and then bring it up to Julie.
Thanks, Commission Chair. My name's John Cole. I'm here with Tom Armstrong. We'd like to present the proposed amendments to the zoning code that are intended to implement some of the recently adopted comprehensive plan policies or follow along with some of the consolidated zoning map updates. It's our intent here this evening to go through 8 topical areas that the proposals are divided up into. We'd like to do that relatively quickly, just so that you can get a scan of the issues in front of you. I'd let you know that some of them have garnered more public interest than others, and we'll let you know in that first scan which is which, with the hope that after that initial presentation will take only clarifying questions perhaps, then go to public testimony, and then we'll come up and revisit some of those items in as much detail as you feel you need to get a comfort level with the proposal. At the end of that round, we will be asking for your recommendation on these items with or without amendments that may come up during the course of the public hearing and your discussion. The first item that has text amendment in your packet involves a proposal to allow retail plant nurseries as conditional uses in residential zones. This came out of testimony and discussion, I guess both in front of you, but then subsequently in front of City Council regarding the Portland Nursery project. So the conditional use approach is a little bit of a compromise to the people that were involved. There is a letter in the packet in support of this from the Mount Tabor Neighborhood Association. The second item, you'll recall that there was a series of downzonings in predominantly the West Hills, but some in Southeast Portland, where R10 properties in particular were downzoned to R20. There is a clause being proposed for the zoning code that would allow people that were in that circumstance of being downzoned to be permitted to have at least one single-family home on their property. This is sort of a non-litigation alternative to people that are otherwise having their properties downzoned. There was no public testimony in conjunction with this. Item number 3, again, when the composite zoning map was amended in a number of situations, a number of neighborhoods across the city, there were RH zoned properties that were changed to mixed use primarily, and where the RH zone went away, it made a series of maps within the RH zoning chapter obsolete, if you will. At the back of the RH zone, there's a series of maps that assigns certain properties a 4-to-1 floor area ratio. This is a little bit of a bump over what would ordinarily be a 2-to-1 allowance in the RH zone. Because some of these properties are no longer RH zoned, we're correcting the 120 map series. There's been some interest on the part of the Planning Commission in this regard. We have had some letters of interest submitted and are in your packets, and we have some additional materials if people want to get into this particular item. Item number 4 was sort of a targeted effort at addressing a concern in the Kings Hill neighborhood, set of 4 properties along Main Street that are single-family homes in R5 zones, but have been operating for a number of years as office uses under something called a revocable permit. Revocable permits are assigned to an individual and not the property. And there's been an interest in changing the approach to allowing office uses in the R5 zone if it can be used as an incentive to preserve a historic resource. So we do have language in there that tries to accomplish that. We have one letter in the record from a person who owns 3 of the 4 properties in support of that proposal. Item number 5, up in the Northwest District in the Giles Lake Industrial Sanctuary Plan District, there is a proposal to expand something called Subdistrict A, Subdistrict B, and to change some of the language that is assigned to Subdistrict B, and a proposal to keep traffic concerns along the southern boundary of that area in check. So there's some limitations on office use and some ability for property owners within this district to increase their development only after they've provided a contribution to an area transportation improvement fund. Item number 6, as part of a packet of cooperation between the City of Portland and the David Douglas School District, there is a proposal to add effectively to add the David Douglas School District to the list of service providers at such time as a person proposes a subdivision within their school district boundary, 11 lots or greater, or a zone change or a planned development, with the idea that that they would have the ability to review those proposals against the anticipated impact on their enrollment levels and have an ability to comment on those particular proposals. Other items that we're doing with David Douglas, as an aside, is we are pursuing co-location opportunities. They need additional elementary schools, so you'll find city bureaus working with David Douglas to see whether or not there's an opportunity there. At a staff level, we're helping them identify potential new elementary school district locations. And you may recall that we have gone through a number of proposed downzonings within the David Douglas School District to try to help them address what is otherwise a concern that the population growth is outpacing their ability to build new facilities. Item number 7, there is a change in the comprehensive plan policies where specifically we have a new policy 5.3. I have the language on the screen behind you. The city's approach to housing potential is here we're evaluating plans and investments for their impact on the supply of housing units that can serve low and moderate income households and identify opportunities to meet future demand. The current comprehensive plan, or the one that's recently been where we've adopted a new policy, the old policy had been more directed at an idea that we would make no land use changes that reduced the capacity of that property to support housing. And I think that our buildable lands inventory investigations and our housing capacity models have shown that within the city of Portland, under our proposed zoning, we actually have an abundance of capacity of housing, and we no longer need to look at it that way. So the proposed zoning code changes that you have in the packet before you today are taking out the zoning code language that had implemented the no net loss housing policies that were removed from the current comprehensive plan. And then last but not least, part of the proposal in front of you today is an update to the trail alignment designations that would go into the city's zoning map. They show up as stars on the city zoning map, kind of a series of proposed alignments, and are used by the Bureau of Development Services staff when a development proposal is submitted, and they're doing some of their due diligence to see what the property is zoned and what's the overlays that are involved. For those properties that have an alignment, they'll see that there's a proposed trail alignment on their property, and then that's kind of a trigger to enter into, I'll call it a negotiation, to see if the city can acquire an easement, perhaps include trail construction in the course of the development of the impacted property. This is an item that generated the most public input, and on both sides of the fence, if you will, both from trail advocacy groups who are interested in seeing this go forward, and then a number of individual property owners who got notice that their property has a proposed alignment on it. So we expect to come back to this one and talk to you about it in a little more detail. And those are the items. Those are the quick 8 areas. And if you have any specific clarifying questions, happy to answer them, or we'll turn it over to public testimony.
Real quickly, before we go to clarifying questions, I just want to make sure that if we have any conflicts of interest, we kind of state them. Then let's try to keep the clarifying questions for this commission, since we have a big agenda, fairly short if we can, and then we'll move into the hearing. Mike?
I see a Portland Parks and Recreation employee in the back of the room, and I don't, when it comes to the trail conversation, at some point, I think we really benefit from having input from other bureaus, from other staff, so I don't know at what point Brett might want to weigh in on that particular issue.
Any other? Chris?
So are we into clarifying, or are we still doing conflicts?
Let's go with conflicts first.
Hold off then.
Okay, any conflicts? So I would like, oh, sorry, Mr. Michelle.
I think it was item 5, the Giles Lake one. My law firm represents a property owner in that area, so I'll recuse myself on that one.
And I have a conflict on item 3, and will recuse myself and step away as the chair for that discussion item. And then Chris will take over, and then I'll come back. Any other? Okay, now let's go clarifying questions.
So on item 3, the 4-to-1 FAR in RH zones, just want to be crystal clear, because I saw some testimony that referred to this as an upzone. And in fact, what we're doing today, these are existing maps that specify the 4-to-1, and we are reducing the area of those maps either because the properties are no longer RH, or because there's some policy foundation in the new comp plan to bring that back down to the default 2-to-1 FAR in the zone. Is that correct? So this is,
That's correct.
if anything, it's a down zone, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Maggie?
So the item number 2, West Hills, it was downzoned because of grade and landslide potential. Is that right? Is that why we did that?
Drainage and landslide.
Okay. And then number 5 for Guild Lake. My computer died, so I don't have the document in front of me. What? So is that EX? Like what's the zone?
Can you?
So the issue is there's sort of 3 different changes going on here. One is we changed, this is the ESCO site that we changed. The previous, under the current comp plan, there was mixed employment EG zoning just along the frontage along Northwest Vaughan, between Vaughan and Wilson. As part of the comp plan and as part of the composite zoning map, we're extending that EG zoning all the way up to Nikolai to encompass the ESCO site and some adjacent properties. At the same time, as part of the employment zoning project, we increased the office allowance from 1-to-1 FAR to 3-to-1 FAR, whereas previously in this plan district, office uses under the old EG zoning were limited to 1-to-1, and that's what the Northwest District Plan and the transportation analysis that went into that, sort of the assumptions for that area were based on that 1-to-1 office FAR. And so with this change to the plan district, we're bringing what we gave with the employment zoning project, 3-to-1 FAR and EG, we're bringing that back down to 1-to-1 FAR for this plan district area. The properties are still eligible to essentially buy another 0.85 FAR of office by contributing to the Northwest Transportation Fund, so they can get up to 1.85 worth of office in this subdistrict B area. Once the map and the employment zoning changes and the plan district changes all settle out, they pretty much wind up where they are today.
And we had discussed this issue of protecting the intersection when we went through the employment zoning project.
Right.
So this is the implementation mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And then, sorry.
I was going to just say that I know we're getting deep into the weeds on this one.
Just one quick
Maggie, could you speak in the mic?
Oh, one quick, the last question. So for number 7, the no net loss of housing, so that's housing, but not affordable housing, correct? So we have a
Correct.
separate policy for no net loss for affordable housing.
Right. The housing, the new policy is what you see up there on 5.3, Prior to this, we had a much stronger, much stricter no net loss of any housing capacity, and this new policy is what replaced it. And so in the few cases, especially the quasi-judicial map changes that would go through, we no longer have to do that accounting on the no net loss of any housing capacity, but then this policy comes into play as part of those changes.
Thank you.
Jerry?
I just want to process question. What's the right time to ask a question about the transportation impacts on Guilds Lake?
If it's clarifying question, go for it.
Okay. So I just wanted to see what the analysis was on the traffic flow on Thurman Street, particularly during rush hours, because it's a bottleneck at this point.
Okay, we'll bring that back to you after the public testimony.
Okay, thank you.
On the school district enrollment capacity, are there any school districts serving the city of Portland besides Portland Public and David Douglas?
Yes, there are three others.
Yes, there's
three others?
There's 6,
Okay.
3 in whole and parts of 3 others.
Okay. So if you were doing a 12-unit subdivision, you would need to get a sign off from whichever one. So Portland Public, for example, you need to get them to sign off.
Commissioner,
Or a letter?
the way that this is written and the way that we're going to structure it, that City Council adopts it, our intent is to make sure that a school district, in order to be subject to that additional review, needs to have an adopted facility
that.
plan that demonstrates that they have a district-wide enrollment capacity shortfall, and that their adopted facility plan is endorsed by the city of Portland. And so at this juncture, the only school district that we anticipate being eligible for this review process would be David Douglas.
Okay. What are the other 3, just so I know?
Centennial?
So Park Rose and Portland Public are the ones wholly within the city of Portland.
Yeah.
There's also Centennial, Riverdale, or Riverside, and what? Reynolds.
Okay. So that Portland has to be willing to give them that. It's not just them having the plan. Portland has to.
We have to, the city has to approve, the city council sort of has to incorporate their facility plan into the comprehensive plan as a supporting document. And
Okay.
so once David Douglas is finished with their school facility plan, then we'll bring it through an adoption or endorsement process that city council will sign off on that as being sufficient. And in that, there will be this finding that there are these enrollment capacity shortfalls that then triggers this provision. The other school districts could go through that similar process. Their enrollment situation isn't as acute as David Douglas is. And so we are not currently working with any of them on that process path to enable them to have that sort of authority as part of the development review process.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions? Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
I have 2, thank you. One, on the one you were just talking about, the school districts, minor technical legal point. You would apply this criteria, comp plan changes, zone changes, and subdivisions.
Subdivisions that would create greater than 11 lots.
I would ask you to check with the city attorney to be sure. I believe the statute is ORS 195-110. I don't know if you can do that. I know that statute's been changed a couple of sessions ago, but previously you could not apply a school capacity criteria to a subdivision approval.
We'll
So just check.
double check. We have been in.
Or maybe you know the answer.
City Attorney's Office has been involved in the development of this, and we're aware that we can't use it as a moratorium, but there are opportunities for there to be other sorts of mitigation that might be allowable, but we'll double check.
Okay. And then the second one, just to repeat a clarification I thought I heard, Tom, on the Giles Lake.
Yeah.
They are eligible for the .85 additional FAR?
Yes.
Okay. As I was reading this, that was not clear to me, so I hope the code clarifies that they're still eligible for that, so thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. So with that, we'll move into the hearing. If you are here to testify for the miscellaneous zones amendment, please fill out a card at the back of the room and bring them up to Julie. We're going to limit testimony to 2 minutes per person, and I'm going to call up 3 people at a time. We're going to begin with Dennis Harper, Martha Cox, and Dana. I'm sorry, Dana, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
Kraftcheck.
Kraftcheck, thank you.
I'm Dennis Harper, a resident of Northwest Portland in the historic Alphabet District. And upon reviewing the miscellaneous zoning amendments, I am very concerned to find that a vast swath of Northwest Portland has been or will be rezoned or zoned RH with a floor area ratio of 4:1. I'm referring to maps 120-6 and 120-7 of the miscellaneous zoning amendments document. Almost all of the FAR 4:1 area occurs within the historic Alphabet District. Basically, most property east of Northwest 21st Avenue has RH zoning with FAR 4:1, while areas of the historic Alphabet District west of Northwest 21st Avenue are spared this higher density designation. The RH zoning with a maximum FAR of 4:1 is a threat to the future of the eastern half of the historic Alphabet District. Property owners and developers will be tempted to demolish smaller historic buildings in the Alphabet District in order to replace them with larger, taller buildings up to FAR 4:1. I'm here to urge the Planning and Sustainability Commission to reduce the FAR to 2:1 in all areas of the historic Alphabet District in order to eliminate the owner-developer enticement to tear down and build bigger. A smaller revision was advocated by the Irvington Community Association for the Irvington Historic District. Please refer to pages 78 and 79 of the miscellaneous zoning amendments. Furthermore, a maximum FAR of 2:1 would be a better fit for properties currently with no structures, such as parking lots. Tall, out-of-scale new buildings near such prominent older buildings as St. Mary's Catholic Cathedral, Northwest Children's Theater, and Trinity Episcopal Cathedral would damage the character of the historic Alphabet District. If you are assuming that the RH zoning with a maximum FAR 4:1 is necessary to sustain an adequate supply of housing units in the city, then please refer to page 120 of the miscellaneous zoning amendments. On that page, the commentary states that due to the large surplus of residential capacity in the city, the code provisions for no net loss of housing and a housing pool are to be deleted. So a reduction of FAR to 2:1 in the historic Alphabet District would not be in conflict with city policies concerning no net loss.
Thank
net
you,
loss
Dennis.
So, thank you.
Appreciate it. Martha?
I'm with Columbia Steel Casting Company. Columbia Steel started manufacturing in Portland in 1901. 1962, we moved out to North Portland along the south banks of the Columbia Slough. I'm also shareholder and director with Heron Leasing, who is the owner of the property on which Columbia Steel currently operates. Our industrial property, we feel, would be adversely impacted by the zoning changes regarding the nature trail. One would be the cost of development of industrial property escalated by the requirement to construct public trails, the value of the property impacted by both the requirement to maintain several hundred feet of trail and assume liabilities related to public access across private property. The wetland impacted trail alignment through the Wapato wetlands would be very expensive to construct and maintain because the area is often inundated by water, or else it would cause tree removal along the bank, triggering potential erosion. I want to be clear that manufacturing companies competing either overseas or domestically with foreign competition have no opportunity to pass on added costs. Security is the most compelling reason for our opposition for the zoning requirements. The main concern is both public safety and security concerns of our employees and property. I continue to be amazed at the brashness of thieves entering the property east of ours. They pulled down our fencing, four-wheeled over the bank, cut off fence locks with bolt cutters, stripped electrical wiring in unoccupied buildings, even brought in equipment in the middle of the night to steal gutters off of buildings. In response, we've taken measures to limit access to our property with employee passes, enforced use of visitor badges, restricted access routes, and security guards. Even with posted notices of private property, people come looking for boat launches, nature trails, or alternative street routes are asked to leave. At public meetings, individuals have bragged about gaining access to our property via canoe. Encouraging public access via the camouflaged north side of our property increases safety and property risks with or without fencing. The last comment was just that the zoning regulations are a forcing function to circumvent Metro's assurance that trails would not cross constructed private property, industrial property without the owner's consent.
Thank you, Martha. Dana?
Good afternoon, Dana Kraftchuk from Perkins Coie here on behalf of Broadmoor Golf Course. I touched on this issue during the composite zoning map hearing because it's both a map issue and a miscellaneous zoning project issue. My comments today will be limited to the public trail that's proposed. We have all the same concerns about public or liability for inviting the public onto an active golf course. Where the trail is located, and I provided today a map, I hope it was passed out to you, that shows the proposed alignment and the comprehensive plan policies that are at issue. As proposed, the trail impacts 5 of the 18 holes on the golf course. And I mean, it seems as if it was designed to curve around and impact more of the holes. What we think would be a more appropriate alignment is to go directly to the already publicly owned Metro Catkin Marsh Natural Area. The comp plan encourages access to natural areas, so provide it. Don't go around it and near it. That way you wouldn't be needing to take public property. It would be on wouldn't have to take private property. It'd be on public property already. An alternative alignment would be within the right-of-way. This is particularly troubling for Broadmoor because the triggers for having to both dedicate the trail and then constructing it are quite low thresholds in the code. It's related to the assessed value of a building. Well, a use like a golf course doesn't have expensive structures, so the requirement to actually construct this trail could be triggered by improvements to a cart building, for example. It's also egregious to Broadmoor because they were very actively involved in the comp plan process and did not get any notice of this trail until after the comp plan process had closed and they received notice of this zoning map hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Quick questions?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Quick questions to both the people concerned about trail. Is this a new was there a trail location on your property prior to this that's being changed or moved? This is a new designation for each?
There is no trail on the property.
This is a new location. The map that I handed out shows in pink the new alignment. The blue is existing and the green is what's being removed, but there was no trail alignment on Broadmoor whatsoever prior to these amendments.
Thank you.
Mike? Did you have a question?
No, I think Brett can respond to that.
Okay.
My assumption was it's part of the 40-mile loop that's been on the books for 30 years or longer, but we'll get the facts later.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Sharon Goldsworthy, Jim Julien, Tim Davis.
Jim Shillin.
Jim Shillin. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, I'm president of the Eastridge Park HOA, located north of Clatsop in the area of Southeast 140th Street and 141st Street. I've handed out a map that will help demonstrate what it is that I'm talking about. I'm concerned about the proposed Scouters Mountain Trail alignment and associated zoning changes that threaten to impact the enjoyment of our neighborhood. I've handed out a map. By the city's own maps, the trail is proposed to pass through an area that is zoned as an environmental protection area on land that is greater than 25% grade and is at risk for earthquakes and landslides. I'd invite anyone who's interested to visit our neighborhood, and I'd be happy to show you what I'm talking about. We've already experienced one landslide that has cost the HOA about $180,000 to repair on the same slope where part of the trail is proposed. Further, the proposed alignment is immediately contiguous to a number of properties in the neighborhood, passing through narrow easements between people's homes or directly behind homes. The planned alignment is intrusive and will have a negative impact on the continued enjoyment of our properties. An email was sent to all the residents in the neighborhood about this proposal. I received comments back from many of the homeowners and have had conversations with many others. There's been absolutely no support for the planned alignment and much concern expressed about the intrusiveness of the trail and the impact on property values, safety, and should the trail appear on future zoning maps. My apologies for the late objection to this alignment, but May 18th was the first time that residents of the HOA were officially notified of the city's plan. Eastridge Park HOA is not in favor of this specific portion of the zoning change, and we would like it removed from the zoning maps.
Thank you, Sharon.
My name's Jim Chalin. I'm here on behalf of the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust. And you should have all received, I think, a very extensive packet of information from us with a cover letter where we have comments mainly in support of alignments that have been on the map for a long time and where sections of trail are actually more accurately represented thanks to GPS information. We do have some concerns about some of the removals. I'm going to leave some time for Walter Valenta, also from the 40 Mile Loop Land Trust, to talk about those if the commission wishes to go into any detail. But you received the information yesterday. I don't expect that you have gone through that in any level of detail. We are very willing to work with staff to resolve all the issues that we've identified. An example would be there was a removal on Northwest Thurman Street, which is more walkable, we believe, and a better connection from Forest Park and Lower Maclay to the Willamette Greenway. That would be an example. There was a removal of a link connecting the Brooklyn neighborhood and Southeast to the Springwater Corridor. Those are the kinds of things that we want to talk through with staff. There were some opportunities that were missed. I think the Tillicum Crossing was not proposed to be placed on the map, nor the Hawthorne Bridge. So, and also connectivity downtown. So we've gone over this. We put a lot of time in, and we'd like to work with staff over the next few weeks so that what is presented to council is something that we can all live with.
Thank you, Jim. Tim?
Hey, you guys, this is Tim Davis, and I actually came to talk about a lot of very specific ideas regarding Central City 2035. But I guess this is just for the zoning, so I'm just going to talk more generically about the zoning changes. Now, first of all, the original Portland zoning code from nearly 100 years ago called for a much higher density than we currently have. I mean, I think our density is lower than Aloha. It's pathetic. A friend of mine is writing a book on this. Our city's density needs to at least double and quickly to make housing much more affordable. There's a function that just came out based on a long study of San Francisco. I mean, housing is only a function of total number of jobs, total pay, and number of housing units. That's it, just those three. And this could easily be done without destroying a single historic home or affecting the look of historic neighborhoods via the wonderful, incredibly logical components that Eli Spivak covers in his amazing talks on missing middle housing, or as Steve Novick calls missing middle housing, or middle housing without the missing. And although the property tax code needs to be written from scratch, obviously, I thank you all deeply for not unfairly taxing ADUs in the property tax code. And regarding these NIMBY arguments that constantly come up regarding zoning change proposals, single-family home-only neighborhoods are natural breeding grounds for NIMBYs, and I truly feel for them. I really do. But after decades pass, they become used to living in a certain way and having semi-privatized open spaces that were intended to be public spaces. And we cannot preserve neighborhoods in amber forever. Jane Jacobs would rightfully abhor this, and cities need to evolve or die. We just can't ever allow single-family only subdivisions to get built in the entire state ever again. It really, truly does not benefit anyone. It only creates exponentially increasing divisiveness over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Questions? No. Okay, Phil Bile, Walter Valenta, Dennis Allen. go ahead.
Hi, I'm Walter Valenta. I'm on the 40 Mile Loop Trust. I want to echo some things Jim said. The stars on the map are amazingly controversial, and on the 40 Mile Loop, we've been living with this for decades after decades. We feel like our board sort of put a lot of those stars on the map the last time and the time before this. So every one of those stars has a history behind it, and before we change them and move them, we want to just have more discussion, and that's what we want to talk with the staff about. The hardest part is getting the easement on the trails. Every gap of the 40 Mile Loop isn't a money problem, it's an easement problem. And so we have a practicality way that we look at these trails, because you can have stars on the map that are never going to happen, and you can have stars on the map that have a practical way that they can happen. And we want to make sure that those stars are practical stars too, or if they're aspirational, they're very important. Also, before we remove stars on private property, because you heard people talk about nobody wants stars on their private property, so before we remove stars that are already on private property, that we've already fought that battle, we need to really be careful we want to do that, because they're hard to put back on. And so we want to close the gap of the 40 Mile Loop, and so we want to add that perspective into this long-term planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Bile?
I'm Phil Bile. I'm an architect with GBD Architects. I'm here representing St. Mary's Cathedral, for whom we happen to be doing some master planning of their 4-block parcel that is in the Alphabet District. I learned just very recently that there is an effort to persuade the Commission that the FAR should be reduced in the RH zone from 4 to 1 down to 2 to 1. The St. Mary's Cathedral site is already zoned 4 to 1, as you might know, and so obviously a takeaway of that would represent a huge economic impact on what is an important part of their long-term livelihood. The purpose of our master planning is to identify a long-term sustainable income for that cultural institution and to maximize that on their behalf. So obviously a huge impact. I am pro-density. I also oppose the idea of reducing the FAR in this district to 2 to 1. Some quick math says that there is over 4 million square feet of developable property within the within the Alphabet District itself. A reduction from 4 to 1 to 2 to 1 would mean a reduction of over 10,000 living units in a central city location. So that's 10,000 living units that could not be located in the central city if we limited the FAR density in that entire district to 2 to 1. If the intent is to preserve historic structures, good historic structures, I think there are better ways to do that than by limiting density. I think one of the greatest incentives that could be entertained would be to give developers incentives to preserve historic structures in exchange for having the opportunity to perhaps increase density on some sites like surface parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Chris and then Mike.
So question for Walter. So I'm a little vague on the process by which we wind up with stars on the map. So could you explain, if you want to push this to staff, feel free, but if you're able, why are the stars first showing up on the zoning map now for this set of trail segments? What's the process that triggers that?
Well, I would let staff do it, but from a layman's point of view is every 20 years we get together and we do this big plan and we put stars on the map and we vision and we dream all the missing trail connections. And over the years we've gotten better and better at it, because in the early days we weren't even sure sometimes whose property they were on, because the scale of those early maps, of those quarter section maps, were so vague. So there's so much of this that's being more specific, and there's so much of this that's so we like a lot of what's going on with the plan is they're refining these stars. And some places we've built trails where the stars, we already got a trail and the stars are adjacent to it, and so it's okay to remove those because we built the trail a block over or something from where we thought. But there's whole segments where we're not sure exactly where they're going to go. And there's lots along the Columbia Slough, actually, because, Mike, honestly, there's a real debate over how close to natural areas trails should go. We need to have that discussion now, because everybody's going to want to push them into the natural areas, I assure you, because it seems easier to push it that way. And I know we've had this discussion before, and our group has had that discussion. The stars represent those choices and decisions, so we're doing the stars right now. They're hard to put on maps. I don't think you guys do it very often, actually.
So this is a once per comp plan process, or is there
I
some
don't
other
want to be
trigger?
the expert on that, but
Okay.
I believe
All right.
so.
I'll hold the question for staff then. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about one of the most significant features of the region's trails, natural areas, and parks system. I want everybody to understand that, and some people may not be that familiar with it. Can you do a 30-second max description of what the 40-mile loop is?
Oh, the 40-mile loop, one of our first planning efforts as a city, we hired the Olmsted brothers to come and do a master plan for the city. And they said we should put a loop around the city connecting all the natural and park areas and view areas. And that evolved into what we now call the 40-mile loop.
Which is
Locationally, they're not
120 miles?
identical anymore, but that's where it evolved into.
How many miles is it?
And is it a loop?
It is a loop.
Yes.
It truly is a loop, and it's 140 miles long now, actually. And there are loops of loops, because one of the things that we're talking about in our group a little bit is before the intertwine, the 40-mile loop took on some of the role of being the loops of loops, but now we have a better organization with the intertwine, so maybe the 40-mile loop, you know, is going to become simpler rather than there's some areas where we're parallel ourselves. So we want to maybe think about the 40-mile loop differently because the intertwine now exists.
Thanks.
Nope. Yeah, good. Thank you, gentlemen. Dennis Allen, Wendy Chung, Karen Carlson. Since Dennis doesn't seem to be here, how about Stephen Griffith? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Chung. I'm a Vice President of the NWDA, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the NWDA. In the materials that you're passing around, you'll notice that we have a map on page 4 of those materials that will sort of synthesize our ask here. And there's also a typo on the first page. I apologize for that. We're requesting deletion of map 120-7 and 120-6, consistent with, I believe his name is Dennis Harper, who was a resident who previously testified, in order to eliminate the 4-to-1 FAR allowances in RH zone parcels. I want to address some of the things that the previous person testified to with respect to density, and some of it's in your materials. As you can see, included in your materials is a mixed-use zoning study conducted by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, which shows that Northwest already has the highest number of housing units among all the areas studied. Separately, we have the highest density in the city. You'll notice also a fairly extensive spreadsheet in the back of your packet, and that represents GIS data that was provided to the Architectural Heritage Center in 2011, showing FARs in our Alphabet Historic District. And you'll see that the vast majority of properties actually have an FAR of far below 4-to-1. So we don't believe that eliminating the bonus to from 4-to-1, which would default to 2-to-1, would actually affect density or reduce the number of housing units in our district. So we respectfully request that you consider giving us the same consideration you did for Irvington in deleting the 4-to-1 FAR bonuses for RH zone properties in the Alphabet Historic District.
Thank you, Wendy. Karen?
My name is Karen. Is that?
It's automatically on.
Okay. My name is Karen Carlson. I'm president of the NWDA. I'm here to briefly talk about 2 items that are on your amendments. The first one is the Giles Lake Industrial Sanctuary Plan in limiting the amount of office uses. NWDA is highly in support of this. The transportation challenges on Thurman, in particular Thurman at 23rd Avenue, interchange with I-405, are huge. We have a lot of growth in the neighborhood already in residential that is going to be putting more impact on that. A higher industrial, office uses are really going to be difficult to handle, so we're in support of that. Quickly on the same thing you've heard on the RH zoning, I'd like to point out to you that the comprehensive plan identifies how significant our historic districts are to create a sense of place. Policy 4.49 identifies the resolution of conflicts in historic districts. In the 1980s, when the area was zoned RH 4-1, 2 years later, the Alphabet District was adopted, and at that time, there was no mechanism to right-size the zoning for compatibility with the historic district. Now we have that opportunity. The list that was shown to you or given to you of all these, there's only 7 properties that have an FAR of 3-to-1 or greater in the historic district. 4-to-1 is too intense.
Thank you, Karen. Stephen?
Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of Riverview Abbey Mausoleum Company. It's a family-owned business that has been in business since 1916. We own a series of parcels around Stevens Creek, and I'm speaking specifically around the Red Electric Trail, Section 2870. We would like to see that portion, as landowners, shifted a little bit onto what is tax lot 2600, which would preserve the value of the other tax lot 500, which we've owned again for over 70 years. And that's the primary interest there. There's also I should add that there is a roadway that was built around 2006 by the city during the sewer rehabilitation. And if the trail was aligned a little bit differently, it would take advantage of some of that site disturbance that already took place in 2006. So that is my request. The commission would consider moving that trail slightly to the west. And I submitted previously to some of the parks people a suggested alignment.
Thank you, Stephen. Mike?
And again, where does the Red Electric run?
I'm not sure of the total direction, but I mean, the section we're concerned with is from Taylor's Ferry Road connecting to Canby Street.
Right. And out into Washington County.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Next is Tom Brennicky. And if you're here to testify on the miscellaneous of the room and bring them up, otherwise these are the last 2 individuals for this hearing. Tom, go ahead.
I'm Tom Brennicky. I represent St. Mary's Cathedral Catholic Church, 17th, 18th, Cooch Davis, that neighborhood, Northwest Portland. I'm on the administrative council. The church owns 3 blocks in the neighborhood there for the church facility, the parish center, the school rather, and then the parking lot today, which is on 17th and Davis. We've been in a development planning process for 2 years, and we strenuously object to any consideration to reduce the FAR from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1. We're very comfortable with the size of a structure at 4-to-1. We've done some massing studies ourselves and understand the size, and with our church right across the street, a historic building, we have no concern over a 4-to-1 building. A change like this would cut our property value in half, depriving the church of millions of dollars to be used for ongoing maintenance and capital needs, long-term capital needs for our church, which is really what we intend to do with our money. And finally, last time I checked, we have a housing crisis here in Portland. Our intent would be to solicit development proposals. We're in the process of doing that right now. We'd hope to have 150 units built across the street from our church and contribute to the solving the housing problem in the city of Portland here today. Thank you.
Hi, Allison Reynolds. I'm here to testify on behalf of Solterra. Solterra owns and is developing a property that I talked to you about a couple of weeks ago at 25 North Fargo Street, which is at the corner of Cook Street and Williams. And the site is currently zoned RX, but is being downzoned to RH as RX is eliminated outside of the central city. And unfortunately, this property does not appear on the 4-to-1 FAR maps, which means it will have a 2-to-1 FAR limit and a 65-foot height limit. development. And Solterra is in the process of breaking ground on a permitted 75-foot tall 4-to-1 FAR building, which will be allowed in the RX zone for the next year, but then would become non-conforming under the proposed 2-to-1 and 65-foot height limit in the RH zone without being added to these maps. So we are asking you to add this property to the 4-to-1 maps in order to keep the brand new development from becoming non-conforming. And I think it's also worth noting that staff's rationale when we talked to them about why this whole block, not just this property through the downzone, was being set at RH was to make sure that the existing development on the other side of the block did not become non-conforming, and that development is built to 4-to-1. So if this block is downzoned and not put on the map for 4-to-1, it will make not only Solterra's property, but I believe it's an elder housing facility that's built to that density, and it will also become non-conforming. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we have questions.
The gentleman from the Administrative Council. So I assume it's the parking lot you're talking about developing for housing?
Correct, 17th and Davis.
And is the intent to develop it for market rate or affordable housing?
Well, market rate produces the highest value for us. We'd love to have an affordable housing component, be able to do it. If we can justify it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, thank you. Next, Brad Perkins and Dorothy Cofield. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here. I want to thank the commission and also the movement by PBOT to upgrade the Sullivan's Gulch Trail to, the constrained list has 3 different categories, and we've been bumped up to this next 10 years, which is great. And it's good to hear that we're going to be on the comprehensive map finally. 4 years ago, we were approved by the council for a concept plan. The way we see this, though, is trying to set a standard for how we might pay for this, and it's a bit different than the normal standard. I have proposed in a letter to the council and Metro, and I'd like to make you people aware that we are offering as a committee to raise half the public private funds if the public will put up the other half for the engineering. This is what's really lacking right now to get us started between 21st and the river, and anything you can do to help. But what this will basically engage the city and the region on is moving us up the ladder as to a secondary level of safe bikeways in this region. For some reason, PBOT has a tough time of going beyond the Springwater Trail and painting the streets up. Whether they're busy streets or not, doesn't matter. We are trying to locate this path not only between the river and Gateway Green, but also out to Multnomah Falls eventually. Okay, so that's huge, both on the recreation level and commute level. Okay, so it's an alternative to the regular car system. And one of the other last things I want to mention is this is a great opportunity for bicycle-oriented development along this trail. And what we need is a look at the possibility of a tax increment financing zone along this area.
Thank you, Brad.
So thank you very much for your time.
Hi, Dorothy Cofield. I'm here for a mapping correction, which I believe John Cole will be submitting to you. My clients, David Himmelberger and Louise Erickson, bought a lot off of Saltzman Road, and I have a packet for you July 6th that has an Exhibit 1, page 13 and 14, and it basically shows the proposed trail alignment. The magenta, the yellow line through their property is in the wrong place. Robert Spurlock with Metro and Emily Roth with the Department of Parks all say it's in the wrong place. It's supposed to be in the Saltzman right-of-way. So I believe that has been corrected. So we want you to adopt that and fix the map so it's no longer on their property. It's zoned environmental conservation. They're presently going through the development review process to be able to build a home. The disturbance area is limited to 5,000 square feet, and they're already exceeding that and will do the mitigation. But they want the ability to fence their property with this trail going on Saltzman Road right-of-way, as it's been fixed, and then it will veer north to connect the West Side Trail. And it's not on their property, but they want the ability to fence it. Right now in the environmental code, you can only have a temporary fence for 5 years to protect your property from being used as an illegal trail. We want to amend the code so that it's permanent and that they can put a fence around the perimeter of the property, and it could be as tall as 6 feet tall.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions? That's it. Thank you very much. So last chance, if you're here to testify on the miscellaneous zone amendments, please fill out a card or come on up really quickly. Doesn't look like we have anybody else here, so with that, we'll close the hearing. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to testify today. John, could you please come back up? Just as an item for my fellow commissioners, and John can probably walk us through this more particularly, but we're going to go through each of the amendments and then just kind of get a pulse as to whether we're accepting the amendment items or not. And then once we kind of figure out if you have any amendments to the amendments, you can do it at each time of each amendment. And then at the end, we'll kind of wrap it all up.
So, Madam Chair, just as a matter of process, I'm aware that I think many of my colleagues only got to read this plan for the first time this weekend. Given that and the volume of testimony, I wonder if it wouldn't make sense to take at least some of these items to work session at a later date.
Why don't we go through them, and if we find we have a lot of consternation and discussion and need more time, absolutely open to that.
Okay.
Great.
So, Chair, you are correct. We are interested in walking through these same 8 items, seeing if there is additional questions on the part of the commission, and if there are commissioners who might wish to make an amendment to the staff recommendation or the staff proposal to you to incorporate into your recommendation to the City Council. So, having said that, the first item that has not generated any additional discussion this evening is the retail plant nursery proposal as conditional use in residential zones.
As I recall, this was our recommendation during the comp plan, and City Council debated changing it, but stuck with us through this one.
Yep.
Okay.
That was a test question. Item number 2, again, there was no testimony. This was adding language allowing 1 dwelling unit at a minimum for those properties that have been downzoned from R10 to R20.
Do you have any questions or concerns on this item? No?
We're gonna move through all of these, I can tell.
And I'm going to just step away real quick and let Chris take 3.
Okay, John, number 3.
Item number 3 was to amend the R8 zone FAR map series to reflect changes in the 2035 composite zoning map. And I do want to clarify, although I think maybe this is understood, that the changes that are being made to the 120 map series as proposed in the staff proposal does not add any additional FAR. Significantly, it removes that map designated area for those properties that have been rezoned away from R8 zone to some other classification, with the exception of the Irvington located properties along Schuyler that I believe the representative or interested party from Northwest District Association was mentioning.
Okay. Colleagues, any points of discussion or questions about this?
Well, I had a question about the Allison Reynolds brought up the multiple properties becoming non-conforming at one location. Can I get the staff response on that item?
So I would say I'm not familiar with the specifics of that North Fargo location, but I would say any development that occurs between now and when the comprehensive plan is effective, that once the comprehensive plan is effective, then we'll go back through and have a map cleanup process where we'll go through a legislative process, much like recap for the zoning code, to catch all of those new developments and true up the comp plan and zoning designations to reflect the development on the ground that's occurred over the last 2 years while we've been in this process.
Jeff?
Can you clarify that, Tom? So you're going to go back, let's take the example before us. They have an
Yes.
approved building conforming with today's zoning. It will be non-conforming once it's built and the FAR goes down. What are you going to do with that? Are you going to rezone
Well, so the FAR isn't going to be, it's not going to be non-conforming until the comp plan is effective in
Right.
2018. We're going to have 2 years of development activity going on in the city while these changes are pending. After that, and we know we're clear and acknowledged by the state, then we can have a map cleanup correction process where we can go back and look at examples like this and say, oh, you developed while we were changing waiting for the comp plan to be approved. Yes, you are right. Just in much of the changes that we've done through this process, we've corrected non-conforming uses to true up the zoning so that they are conforming. We'll go back through a process to correct both the comp plan map and the zoning to match the development on the ground that we would expect to be there for a number of years.
This particular situation, as an example, it's not a zoning correction. It's an FAR correction. Is that
right? I mean, that would be included in what we look at.
So you're going to do a packet
Yes.
of legislative changes to take all development that happens in the interim and take them out of non-conforming status.
Right.
Okay. Is there a problem, since we're aware of at least one piece of property that's been brought forward, to do that today, or your preference is to do a... I guess my concern is if I'm building today, I'm going to need to explain to my lender, future purchasers, oh yes, we're going to be non-conforming, but don't worry, the city's going to have a process to take us out of non-conforming.
Right. As I said before, we were not aware of this block on North Fargo. We'll go back and look at it and see if a correction needs to be made now, especially in light of the other development on the block that she referred to, and we can take a closer look at that.
It seems to me if people can present evidence of approved plans, approved building permits, rather than making them wait for this legislative cleanup in 2 years, perhaps they could be, if there's time, to incorporate them today. I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, Maggie?
And to clarify, not all of these it's not all 4-to-1 going to 2-to-1. It's 4-to-1 going to different FARs.
The majority of the changes on these maps are because properties have been rezoned from an RH zone to a mixed-use zone. That's the majority of the changes. I do want to correct one component. We do have an area near Terwilliger Plaza where we've expanded the 4-to-1 area in response to a conversation that occurred at City Council. But Commissioner, the majority is because they're going to a mixed-use zone.
And in the RH, it's either 4-to-1 or 2-to-1.
Okay.
One or the other.
All right. So my concern is that we're treating all the historic areas consistently. So we've had advocacy in Irvington that's resulted in a change. We have advocacy and testimony today in the Alphabet District, in fact, conflicting testimony in different directions. So I think I would appreciate some process where we understand how this mapping change intersects all the historic districts. Are there other historic districts besides Alphabet and Irvington that are impacted by this?
There is one other, the Kings Hill district. And here's a map. Do you have the hard copies?
I do. Commissioner Smith, I have tried to take your inquiry earlier and provide a map with locations where a 4-to-1 FAR map intersects with a historic district, and I'm afraid the clarity of these may not be as good as I'd like.
Thank you.
But they're centered around the core of the city, and I'm going to focus in on the Alphabet District since that's the one that seems to have generated the most discussion here this evening. And in yellow is the properties that are subject to the 4-to-1 FAR, and then in the maroon line is the historic district. And so you can see that there is a significant overlap. The other area that is shown on this map that I think is worth looking at is that to the lower left-hand corner there, Kings Hill Historic District also has a significant amount of the 4-to-1 FAR shown. And then I'm going to cross the river and pick up the bottom of the Irvington area, and you can see that there just gets to be a bit of 4-to-1 FAR in the Irvington Historic District. So I think those are the three areas where your concerns intersect.
And the earlier advocacy from Irvington, was that the entirety of those yellow areas or only a portion of them?
Well, the request is to remove them in their entirety.
Okay.
It's generated a little bit of a discussion among staff, and you know, the Alphabet District is kind of eclectic, and there are, you know, certainly areas within the Alphabet Historic District where a 4-to-1 FAR would appear out of place, and there may be other areas where it wouldn't be quite as onerous. So given a perfect world, you know, it would be nice to go back in and rather than deal with an all or nothing question, perhaps modify the FAR maps, but that wasn't the time schedule that we were provided.
So that relates to my second question, which is that after this body recommended the comp plan to City Council added a number of additional historic preservation policies, right? So is there a need to true up this mapping with those additional policies that City Council added to the comp plan for historic preservation?
It certainly is an opportunity. You know, as John said, it was a sort of a timing question. You know, the Irvington comments came when we had our discussion draft out, and we were able, between the discussion draft and the proposed draft, have time to look at those and sort of just the relatively smaller geographic impact of those changes versus the entirety of the Alphabet District. We have not had time to, I guess, confirm Karen Carlson's assessment as to how the area is developed, as to what FAR it is developed, and as to whether it's 3-to-1 FAR on average or where the higher density 4-to-1 is in terms of how that fits the existing character. So, you know, I think if you don't recommend changing the map and just moving forward, it'll be an issue that we'll address at council. It's also an issue that it is the status quo that is today and is handled by the Landmarks Commission through their design review process.
So is there an opportunity to come back to this body with more analysis before this goes to council?
There is a small window of opportunity to bring it back either at next week's meeting or on August 9th, and we can see what we can get done in the interim to look at the Alphabet District a little closer.
Is there an interest among my colleagues to have a deeper look at this?
Yeah, I would be interested in being able to digest the materials from Northwest History Association and others. I'd support that.
Maggie?
And is there any, so you were talking about the design review from the Historic Historic Commission. Is there any design overlay in this area? Like,
Well, that's
That
what the
would be the
historic
historical.
district comes with, is
Okay.
that historic district review that goes through the Landmarks Commission.
Just to clarify, the Landmarks Commission doesn't have, or do they have the ability to reduce or increase FAR?
They do.
Oh, they
and,
do?
And that is one of the conflicts and rubs is,
I see, I didn't realize.
does the zoning code create an expectation of a mass and scale of development that doesn't fit the historic character? And that, you know, there are many letters from them to you, to the city council, to better right size the zoning and both the FAR and the height, and this will come up in the central city plan as well, to right size those on the zoning map so that they have clearer direction and they don't have to, I guess, be the bad guys and say, no, the zoning code may say that's okay, but the historic character and the design guidelines for the historic district say you're out of proportion.
Okay.
So I'm going to recommend we ask staff to bring this back to us in the near future. Is everyone okay with that?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Chris? What is it they're going to analyze?
They're going to look at the developed FAR, they're going to look at the comp plan policies that council's adopted, and what we see on the map, and come back with a recommendation.
And Commissioner, I'd add that as part of that review, that we might see whether or not there's a more fine-toothed approach to applying that
Yeah,
map.
My interest is more like how Irvington was opted out of 4-to-1 FAR in terms of the equal treatment.
They testified at the discussion draft phase, whereas NWDA has waited until the proposed draft phase, right?
Whoever's ox is gored.
Yeah.
Speaks up. Is that?
The advantage to being involved early.
And
All the
I
citizens
right,
pay attention to that. The earlier
and I
you
would
get
say
involved, the better your chance of influencing outcomes.
Right, and again, when we look at it, you know, there's a handful of half block properties that has I guess in the end, a lower impact on the sort of development capacity, especially residential capacity. So the magnitude, the scale of that change is less so. I will say that we did have time to look at the buildable land inventory for the Alphabet District, and currently, you know, in looking at what is vacant and underutilized in that area, the BLI, we estimate that there's probably 600 units of additional capacity in this RH area. And so, roughly speaking, dropping the FAR from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1 would be a swing of about 300 units of capacity. Not a great amount, but again, given the location and the closeness to the central city, it's one of concern to us.
Okay. So we heard 10,000 units from Phil Bio. So I don't know. That'd be good to get some numbers.
Andre?
Andre?
Yeah. I have a quick question. So has the Landmark Commission, are they okay with what you're proposing today?
I don't know that they have weighed in it specifically.
Okay. And then secondly, the reduction of going from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1 in the FAR, would that still be eligible under the proposed bonus system, IZ coming forward if they wanted to? Could they bonus back up to eventually get their bonus through the housing, the IZ?
Yes. Eventually, they will be eligible for an inclusionary housing bonus if they have a project that is required to comply with those provisions.
Okay. And then would religious institutions be exempt from the IZ?
No.
Can you repeat that question again?
Would religious institutions be exempted from the inclusionary housing requirements? And I don't believe that there is an exemption for that.
Maggie?
So, to clarify the question, I didn't hear all of it. So the inclusionary housing bonus, that would, if we kept this area at 4-to-1, they would still be eligible for a bonus, FAR bonus, if it was
Right.
20 or more units, et cetera. Or,
At either FAR, they'd be eligible, right?
On either FAR, if they
Okay.
brought forward a project that had more than 20 units and they were required to provide the whatever mandatory rate of affordable housing, they would be eligible for whatever bonus we work out to propose that will come to you in October. That yes, they would be eligible, whether it was 4-to-1 or 2-to-1.
Mike, did you have a comment? No. Okay, so let me phrase my question a little differently. So I didn't hear a lot of comfort with deferring, but is there anybody who would want to see us either, affirm the 4-to-1 map changes tonight, or conversely, act on NWA's request to basically remove the 4-to-1 within the Alphabet District? Is there a consensus on either one of those?
I thought there was consensus for a finer look.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I heard nods all around, but if there is, that's great.
Sure.
Okay.
And the fine tuning is what
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
particularly interested in.
So we'll look for you to come back to us.
So you'd like this to be back in front of you?
Yes, please. And I'll welcome the chair back from exile.
I don't think she wants to come back.
You took a break? All right, well, let's keep moving.
Here she comes.
Here she comes. All right, John, item 4?
Item number 4 was the text that added the ability for office uses in historic structures and R5 zones, existing office uses, to go through a historic resource preservation process rather than continue as a revocable permit. 1 letter in support, no letters in opposition.
Any items or questions for this one? I think we can move on. Thanks, John.
I'll step away.
The 5th item, Giles Lake Industrial Sanctuary Plan District language and expansion of the boundary of the district, and adding language in that addressed allowable FAR assigned to office uses. I would comment that we did receive 1 letter from a property owner that was requesting that exemption be allowed for historic landmarks, and that for those historic landmarks that are folded into this area, that they be allowed an FAR of 2-to-1. And this was specifically requested by a property owner along the, the eastern edge of this, western edge of this property, a Bill Nato-owned set of properties there that are existing and happen to be historic district landmarks that currently have a 2-to-1 FAR allowed under their current zoning regulations. Staff does not object to this.
Chris?
So a question and then a comment about that testimony. So the question is, the reason we're expanding subarea B is because additional lots were rezoned from industrial to employment as part of the comp plan. Is that the rationale?
Correct.
Okay, and the property owner along the western edge has been subject to this 1 or 1.85 restriction since the time of the Northwest District Plan, right? That's not a new restriction.
Not correct.
Okay, educate me.
So they goodbye, Andre. They currently have industrial zoning, not
I see.
EG zoning, and in our industrial zoning is this exemption or this allowance that if you have a historic landmark, you can get up to 2-to-1 office use in the historic landmark building. It's an incentive for historic preservation within our industrial zones. We think it's reasonable to carry that over
Move to employment zoning.
into this area, because we know that there are at least 2 cases of historic landmarks with a desire as part of that preservation to allow that use.
So I think, yeah, the original proposal for 5 is entirely consistent with the Northwest District Plan, which I helped work on that provision from the neighborhood side at that time. I'm, I guess, amenable to carrying over that historic preservation bonus into this.
Does anybody have any concerns with that amendment? Jeff?
No, I don't have concerns with the minute. I had a question. We had several months ago testimony on this issue from, I don't remember if it was the NATOs or other property owners. And I believe there was discussion about future transportation studies. And I don't know if those are still happening, but if there are new studies that show more traffic capacity than is being assumed today, are they now locked in at this lower FAR, or will there be an opportunity to revise the FAR based on new? Will they have to do that quasi-judicially? Can they do it quasi-judicially? Will there be, what's happening with updated transportation
There's
planning?
2 issues there. When we refer to future transportation studies, that speaks to actually the zone change process of, especially the properties north of Wilson will still have their IH and heavy industrial zoning now that they have now today. They're comp planned for mixed employment EG zoning. When they come in for that EG zoning, to realize that EG zoning, they will need to do those additional transportation studies to basically amend or modify the Northwest District transportation study as part of that zone change process. This bonus is, this is what they will be allowed to do, is the 1-to-1 FAR, and if they want to do more than 1-to-1, they can buy up to 1.85 FAR. But the maximum in terms of office use that they could get is the 1.85 FAR. That's what we've been in discussions with ESCO and their representatives, and sort of asked them, is this fit with what your plans are and what you see your future are? And it's my understanding they are comfortable with this arrangement in terms of being able to get up to that 1.85 office FAR under the EG zoning here.
If you'll indulge me, a very quick policy question. I'll ask for a short answer. Is the motivation for this to limit office in the EG, or is the motivation traffic capacity limitations?
It's a traffic capacity limitation in this location. Now, if 20 years from now or 10 years from now we're wildly successful with all of our other transportation improvements and we see the big mode shift splits, we can go through and do another Northwest transportation plan, and based on those results, revisit these FAR limits.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Nope.
So, Tom.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
We would like, well, I guess
We'll present it at the end.
we'll present this motion at the end to amend this proposal to capture this change.
In a practical sense, how many properties is this actually going to apply to, and what sort of office capacity are we talking about?
So it's everything in the gray area, and as I said, it's mostly the ESCO site plus 3 or 4 other properties along Nikolai that are sort of south of Nikolai.
So this would all be new construction in what is now the ESCO site?
Yes, it would be redevelopment of the ESCO site. Some of it is already to sort of true up some of the ESCO corporate headquarters that exist today, that it would be consistent with that zoning. But yes, that's sort of going forward as they retool and reprogram what the activities that happen on that site, these limits would apply.
Thanks.
And the analysis during Northwest District Plan is if 1 to 1.85 were exceeded, the freeway interchange would fail, basically, was the concern.
Right.
Right.
And the additional, the buying the additional 0.85 provides more funds to do more transportation improvements
Right.
in this area. Okay.
Item number 6 was the adding language to assign service provider status to a school district for those school districts that have an adopted and endorsed school facility plan. The leading candidate to qualify for that being David Douglas. David Douglas did submit a letter of support today for this proposal.
Go ahead, Eli.
I guess I would like to get a follow-up on Commissioner Bacharach's question on the legality of this. And independent of the legality, I've got some concerns of giving, I like the compromise, as I heard presented previously with David Douglas, thank you, school district in terms of the zoning map area. But this seems like a pretty broad approach to a narrow issue, and it has no sunset kind of provision. It seems, in my mind, that we might be able to craft something much narrower. And I'm a little concerned about what would mitigation options look like housing with no kids, or senior only. It's just hard to think practically, or pay the school district money. It seems like I want to see some detail about what that might look like. Also recognizing that there's history examples elsewhere in the country where school districts artificially say we can't take any more students as a way to keep development from happening in that community. And that's why I asked about other school districts. It does sound like Portland could control whether a school district would be allowed access or not to this provision.
Yes.
But from that standpoint, Portland could have some other way of helping to rein in housing development without having to enlist, it basically outsource some control of the zoning and of up to 12 unit developments to a school district. So I guess I have some general concern with this approach, although I support what Portland's proposing to do with David Douglas.
Okay.
Any other concerns, questions?
I'd make a quick comment that at the end of our discussion, we'll be asking for a recommendation along with any sort of commentary that you want to pass on to the City Council.
Okay.
So if I could just, if there was an amendment, Eli, that you wanted to propose on the basis of that, that's sort of, this is the moment to put it on the table.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going into, either there's other commissioners who will vote on this one and share that and not support this item, or it'll go into a comment. So that's sort of the vector we're on, just to be clear.
Is the mitigation stuff outside of the zoning code? Is that what I gather?
Yes. Yeah. And, it's tough to say what that mitigation would look like. It could be developers paying for portable classrooms to increase capacity. When we've looked at this, I think it's the Beaverton School District has this authority. They've never exercised it in terms of vetoing or denying a development. So we don't have a lot of good examples of a school district saying, no, that's too much.
And there is specific language in the statute that prohibits a school district from using this facility plan approach to implementing a de facto moratorium on construction.
But the concept of the statute, and I was involved in this 20 years ago in the legislature, was that once you establish the zoning, that's the time to look at service availability, including school availability, and to put the burden on the school district to go to local jurisdictions and say, oh, you're doing these various zoning map decisions, here's our capacity. So once the zoning was established, for example, a subdivision developer did not have to reestablish school capacity. So that was my concern, and I believe the statute does allow some discretion if you're asking for a zone change or asking for a comp plan amendment that would increase residential development, to then have to go back to the school district and coordinate on capacity. But if you're doing a subdivision, that's why the term subdivision caught my eye, you should not have to do that. If you're doing a subdivision, consistent with zoning, you should not have a school capacity requirement.
And Commissioner, and Eric let me know that we believe that was changed at the state level
Was it?
a
Okay,
couple of
then
years ago, but we'll get you that.
I know there were changes in 2007,
Yeah.
2009.
I
I still don't like it, but it's the law now. I guess I have to live with it.
Right.
I wasn't there those sessions, so
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Recently.
Thank you. So I share Eli's just sort of policy concern, but I guess if it's consistent with state law, I'm comfortable with it just because.
Yep, okay.
And so Eli, is there an amendment you want to propose at this point, or?
Nope.
Okay.
I would like to see it though.
Okay, yeah. No.
Item number 7 then. And Julie, I think this is Andre trying to reconnect with us. So, item number 7 is the removal of the language from the zoning ordinance that implemented the no net loss of housing policy that was replaced in the current comp plan with the new policy 5.3 that no longer looks at the total number of units that could be built under the city zoning and starts to focus more on the low and moderate income households and our approach to making sure that we're not getting in the way of building those.
Any questions or concerns? Got our support on that one, move on.
Then item number 8 is the trail alignments, and you'll have heard a number of comments and concerns from individual property owners. Let me quickly make 2 points that staff does support the testimony that was received here earlier this evening from Dorothy Cofield on behalf of the Saltzman Road property. This was a mapping error that we've been able to trace back, and the trail alignment should continue within Northwest Saltzman Road right-of-way to the municipal boundary. I don't support the remainder of Ms. Cofield's testimony regarding changing the fence height allowances as part of this process. And then we did receive testimony from the, I want to get this right, the Northwest Turtle Working Group that looked at the trail alignment along Peninsula Canal. And here the proposed alignment, when you look at it in detail, goes along the top of the levee. And then I want to be fairly specific here on the picture behind you. You'll see
Can you
that
please point to this on the map? I'm just,
okay.
thank you.
On the picture behind you, once we're past the Riverside Golf Course on the bottom of the map, and we're up top, the Turtle Working Group has asked that the trail alignment be nudged to the bottom of the levee so that the people using that particular trail are not visible to an active nesting pond turtle, I don't know what you call them. A
Bathing
nest. I'm looking at Mike to see if it's what a collection of
Turtle
turtles.
habitat.
So it's a nudge that I think we can make. Honestly, I think the stars on the map allow that sort of detailed design discussion to take place regardless as to whether or not the stars on the map show on the top of the levee or the bottom of the levee, but it seemed an easy accommodation to make. And you know, those turtle people are slow, but they're persistent.
Mike?
That's great. Well, I have a lot of concern. First of all, with regard to the 40-mile loop, those stars, which are the alignment, but it's a very broad alignment that can be adjusted over time and have been on the map for more than 30 years. Some of the other trails we heard about, Red Electric, is more recent. I personally, even though I'm pretty familiar with these areas, have a lot of angst about making recommendations from this committee when there is an opportunity for the 40-mile loop land trust, for other groups to interact with the city and in some cases with Metro. And for example, 40 years ago or whatever, the trail alignment was put along the south side of Smith and Bybee Lakes. Well, it turns out 40 years later, there's a bald eagle nest and a very large great blue heron nesting colony there, and the trail was amended to take that into consideration. Obviously, these trails are functionally useless if there are gaps. And so taking anything off an existing alignment, understanding that the alignment can be adjusted by working with the property owner or whatever, is not something I would support at all. And I heard, I think, a reasonable request from the 40-mile loop to sit down with staff and kind of hammer some of these things out. And that personally would be my preference. We could spend we're about an hour late now. We could spend a half an hour talking about this, bringing staff up and so forth, and hash through it. But I think it makes more sense to do as has been requested, to get the parties together and come up with a solution. I don't know if Brett Horner, who is here from Portland Parks and Recreation, wants to comment on that suggestion. I don't know if it's acceptable to Portland Parks and Recreation or not, but that's how I'd prefer to proceed.
Jeff?
Yeah, Mike, thanks. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I just want to ensure this working group includes some of the property owners who testify with their concerns, so at least they can have an opportunity to be part of an informal dialogue. Maybe they have suggestions. They showed some suggestions. I have no idea how efficient or effective they are, but at least they should be an opportunity to be at the table. Since you're putting a public use on private property, I think they're entitled to that. I do have a question, staff and Mike. When you say these stars have been there for 30 years, I understand the 40-mile loop people have been working on it that long, and I'm sure they have a lot of
Or
maps.
longer.
I'm sure they have a lot of maps with a lot of stars, but they haven't been formally adopted, have they?
Yes, they have. In fact, it's not just the 40-mile loop. The intertwine was referenced. There actually is a bi-state regional trail network that has been adopted by Metro and local jurisdictions. They all work together on these alignments. The obvious reason for doing that, again, is if you have discontinuities and you don't have a continuous trail system, it is basically worthless.
I understand. I'm just.
It's like the road.
I'm trying to make a legal point. Are they legally
there are
adopted?
stars on the map.
On the zoning map
On zoning
today.
On the zoning
so I'm
map today.
confused because this
But-
talks about increasing.
But there are examples in the proposed trail alignment under consideration this evening and going forward to City Council that represent new territory where the property owner does not today have stars on their map, and we're proposing to put them there. So there are examples.
Can I, just for a point of clarification, so Tom or John or Eric could talk about the relationship of this map we're talking about now to the maps that we've already talked about in the comprehensive plan, so we can connect those dots. And just also clarify that, of all the stars that are being proposed to be added to this map, most all have been part of other trail plan projects vetted publicly, if not actually approved by City Council, but we just haven't gotten them on the map before. So could you clarify those 2 points?
Yeah, so if you look on page 135 of the staff report, it has the comprehensive plan map figure, 8-2, that was adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. And that these proposals to basically take that map and implement it in the zoning code so that when somebody comes in for development, BDS and PBOT and Parks and whoever can negotiate with the property owner as part of that development to get the trail alignment, just as what happens today when somebody comes in for a greenway trail or something like that.
So if you're going to, can I ask a question? So if you're going to develop your property and you've got the stars on your property, so you're being told, we heard testimony about the value of what you're building relates to whether or not you have to improve it. Why isn't it related to how much of a burden you're putting on the trail system?
Just to answer that question briefly, there is a proportionality requirement constitutionally that we have to consider when we impose the trail requirement. So it has to relate to the development in some way.
So you're just looking, but the way the city implements that is they look at the cost of what's going in as opposed to whether or not it's actually creating any need for the trail.
There's a relationship to the creation of need too that is part of that analysis. So it's not purely cost. To build on what Tom said, the map that you're looking at essentially has been adopted as part of the comp plan already in your past action and by council recently. But of course, that map is not detailed enough to be able to see individual properties on it, and now you're getting into the stars on the map where you can actually see, and so property owners are getting notified of that. And some of those maps were part of the old comp plan and part of the old zoning map, and as these gentlemen have pointed out, that we've both taken away and added to the old maps. Most of the justification for the changes had to do with the fact that we had over time a parks trails map and a transportation trails map that didn't always align, and so a lot of the remapping that occurred with this comp plan update was to make sure that both parks and transportation system maps agreed on the location of the trail, because we had some implementation issues where they didn't agree. So that was the main impetus for this overhaul of the trail map with the comp plan. So in a narrow sense, the decision you're making tonight is really whether you want to implement the comp plan map through zoning or through some other route. If you don't put stars on the map, you're going to be doing it through some other route. If you reach a conclusion that the map is wrong and you want to revisit it, you can do that. You'd need to tell City Council that the comp plan map was wrong in these areas and they need to look at that again or something.
Did I understand, Eric, the comp plan map is not site specific? So if I'm a property owner and I've just realized I have stars on my property, I might not have been able to tell that by looking at the comp plan map.
Correct. So now that we've zoomed in a little bit, it's clear.
So that property owner might have ideas to suggest that says, oh, now that I see where you want to put stars on my property, I have a suggested alternative alignment.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be inconsistent.
The example of a slight tweak to go around some turtles is probably not even visible on the citywide comp plan map, but if you were totally changing the location by multiple blocks or something, it might imply.
I would just say, I agree with Mike. I would agree. We don't want to dive into this at an alignment level tonight, but I would hope as part of this working group, if that's what it's going to be, we be sure everybody who feels they have new stars on their property has an opportunity to participate and suggest alternatives to the stars. And I think it might also be helpful, again, not tonight, that talks about the regulatory mechanism for getting property, getting easements is in 33.272. It might be helpful to get a little briefing on that when it comes back, because I'd like to understand sort of the questions Michelle was asking. On one hand, Eric says you have to provide a nexus proportionality test. On the other hand, you write applicants for land use review or for building permits are required to grant an easement. So again, I don't want you to answer that tonight, but those are the kind of questions I think would be helpful as we're looking at where should these stars go and listening to private property owners' concerns to understand what the review process is.
And as part of that, I'd also like to hear about the question about liability, whether or not the city takes on all the liability, or if the property owner's getting whatever's over the Tort Claims Act, how that works out.
And I guess I did have one more comment. We heard testimony about fencing. And is the prohibition on fencing because it's in an EC zone, or is there some prohibition on fencing along public trails?
We'll check that out. My guess is it has to do with the C zone.
Okay.
the environmental overlay zone, and there are fencing standards in the E zone.
I would, if there's a public trail adjoining a residential property, I would hope they'd have an ability to fence. So if we need to consider a code amendment to allow that, I'd like that to be on the table as well. So thank you.
And next time we take this up, I think we would benefit from understanding what this system looks like and how it functions. So we're aware of the overall picture and importance of the system.
I would welcome taking this as a whole separate item. I think it's important enough, as you said, Mike, that we should understand what we're doing.
And it is, I'd make a comment that the Bureau of Planning staff did not come up with these particular new segments of the alignment that is, as was mentioned earlier, they're either being true to where an existing trail has actually been built, or they're a function of some other process that did go through a public review process, as in the Sullivan's Gulch Trail, which generated a number of comments. But that was arrived at through its own review process, and that was reflected in the network that's in front of you tonight.
And this may also be one of those instances where those interested on the commission would benefit from a little bit of a field tour or something to look on the ground with this.
So one specific question?
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
So in the case of the golf course, what was the rationale for putting it where it went?
May I make a proposal, since we're going to come back to this item? Could we just have that as a question we address at that time, just so we can keep moving?
Yep.
Are there any other kind of clarity questions on this item for staff? So, and since I stepped out, it's my understanding that we're going to have further discussions on item 3 and now item 8. But there were no other amendments to any of the other proposed amendments.
It's not too bad.
It's an amendment to the Giles Lake.
Oh,
There
correct.
was a staff.
That we support, so no other additional amendments. Okay, so would you like us to do like a formal vote on all but 3 and 8 tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Let's get closure on that. while we
sounds
can.
good. Before we do that, I do have one question. There was a fair amount of written testimony about kind of in Northeast Portland, the property at the Lloyd Cinemas. Is that is that supposed to be on Central City 2035 and not on this? Or is
I
that
believe
part of
so,
this
yeah.
package?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Central City.
Perfect. Okay. So
So I'm diving into this, and I'd ask for the Planning Commission to approve the miscellaneous zoning update, subject to the Giles Lake text revisions proposed by staff, and the major public trail alignment, I guess, is number 8 and number 3, that I guess you're asking that we bring those back for further discussion in one fashion or another. I think that the item number 3, we might be able to work that through the FAR maps faster than we could go through the trail alignment.
I think if we just got the amendment of what people are comfortable with, the motion of what people are comfortable with approving tonight, that we can bring the others 2 back and recommend how we treat those procedurally and in terms of amendments. Okay.
I'll give that a try if you like.
Thanks,
that'd be
Chris.
fabulous, Chris.
I would move that we endorse items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, including the 2-to-1 historic property FAR text amendment to the Giles Lake plan.
Second.
Julie, you want to call the vote? Or is there any discussion? Sorry.
I'm recusing myself because of the Giles Lake part of it. So
Okay. Any discussion? Hopefully not. Great. Let's go ahead and take the vote, Julie.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. We're going to work on trying to get Andre on the phone, and I'd like to chat with you guys. Okay.